God, we desperately need you this morning. But we say your grace is enough for whatever circumstances we face, wherever our world's at, God, you are with us, and we thank you for that. We ask, Lord, you fill us with your Spirit this morning. Would you be with us? Would you open the scriptures to us and open our minds and our hearts to hear from you, God? We long for your presence. And thank you that you delight to be with us, God. We love you. And we desire that you would be made famous throughout all of Sturgeon County and around the world. We pray this in your name, Lord. Be glorified. Amen. Would you be seated? Well, good morning. So I have something to attend to just before we dive in, and it has to do with this right here. I just can't ignore it. So I was thinking about this when I came in, and I remember this story about Francis of Assisi, if anyone's heard of him before. He was a monk in the 12th century, and he had a love for nature and for animals. And there's a story of him walking through the forest with his friends, and he's talking about how you can even preach to the animals. And they came to a large section of birds that were gathered over in one area. And he says, "Why have I never preached to the birds before?" And let me tell you, I never thought I would be preaching to the birds before. But if you're watching online, you can't see. We have some geese and duck decoys on the side. We've got, as Brent said, some beasts over here, some deer and an elk mounted behind me. I gotta be careful if I stand right here too much because I might become like that dog in The Grinch with the antlers, depending on where you're seated. So I'll watch out for that. But in all seriousness, I'm excited to dive in to the last bit of Job with you this morning and for what God has for us. You know, the book of Job has hit home, I think, for a lot of us in some very personal ways over the last few weeks. It's touched upon personal experiences ranging from past pains to current sufferings. It's really brought things to the surface for some of us. But God doesn't bring things to the surface in order to harm us or to haunt us. He does so to heal us. And so I want to encourage you this morning, if there's things he's been bringing to the surface, hold on to him and let him walk through that with you. Not only is Job difficult to read, just from a practical sense, it's a super long book. It's an ancient book. It's got poetry that we don't know what to do with a lot of the time. So just on a practical note, it's really difficult to read through. But especially for those of you who've been walking through the road of suffering, it ramps it up that much further. So I just want to take a moment to just honor you and thank you for walking through that the last few weeks, over the last month and a half, as we've dived into the book of Job, as you've opened yourself up, as you've been asking the difficult questions. I've seen that, I've heard that as I've been meeting with many of you one-on-one. I've seen that in the small groups that I'm privileged to get to visit and meet with and gather with. You guys have been doing a wonderful job just diving in and being honest and real and asking those tough questions, even when you don't have the clear answers. So I just want to acknowledge you for that. Thank you. And for those of you who are tuning in online as well, you've been commenting and sharing, and so thank you for engaging with that as well. I can see that God's been speaking to us individually and as a church family, and I believe he's going to speak to us this morning. So let's dive in. Let's see how the story of Job ends. And then to close off this series, I want to leave us with two words this morning, and that is perseverance and promise. Perseverance and promise. If you're able to with me, would you stand for the reading of God's word? We're going to open the scriptures here to Job chapter 42. I'll give you a second to get there. Job chapter 42. And we're in Job chapter 42, verse 7. So if you open with me, it says this: "After the Lord had spoken these words to Job, the Lord said to Eliphaz the Temanite, 'My anger burns against you and against your two friends, for you have not spoken of me what is right, as my servant Job has. Now therefore take 7 bulls and 7 rams, and go to my servant Job, and offer up a burnt offering for yourselves. And my servant Job shall pray for you, for I will accept his prayer not to deal with you according to your folly. For you have not spoken of me what is right, as my servant Job has.' So Eliphaz the Temanite and Bildad the Shuhite and Zophar the Nemathite went and did what the Lord had told them, and the Lord accepted Job's prayer. And the Lord restored the fortunes of Job when he had prayed for his friends. And the Lord gave Job twice as much as he had before. Then came to him all his brothers and sisters and all who had known him before, and they ate with him in his house. And they showed him sympathy and comforted him for all the evil that the Lord had brought upon him. And each of them gave him a piece of money and a ring of gold. And the Lord blessed the latter days of Job more than his beginning, and he had 14,000 sheep, 6,000 camels, 1,000 yoke of oxen, and 1,000 female donkeys. He had also 7 sons and 3 daughters. And he called the name of the first daughter Jemimah, and the name of the second Keziah, and the name of the third Keren Hapuk. And in all the land there were no women so beautiful as Job's daughters. And their father gave them an inheritance among their brothers. And after this, Job lived 140 years and saw his sons and his sons' sons 4 generations. And Job died an old man full of days. You may be seated. So what do we see in this final section of Job? What is this all about? I think it's really easy and really tempting to conclude that this is a happy ending for Job. We might be tempted to say, all's well that ends well. And I want us to just hold on to that for a second, and I want to challenge that thought for us this morning, and instead have us consider how, rather than being a simplistic happy ending, it's actually a new beginning entirely. Okay, so throughout the story of Job, Job hasn't been asking God for anything. He hasn't been asking him for things, for material things that he lost. He hasn't been asking for things the way that they were. Instead, he's been asking God for himself. Job has desperately missed that relational connection that he previously had with God. When Job is speaking to God, when he is lamenting, when he's pouring his heart out, he's not just speaking about God, he's actually speaking to the God that he personally knows. There's this relational context at play here. When Job speaks, his lamenting plates are in the context of relationship with his Creator. But the friends are different. They speak to Job about God, but they never actually go and directly address God himself. They're speaking to Job about God, but they never speak to God himself. They focus on their wisdom, on their supposed knowledge, about the things they know about God, but they don't even have a relationship with him. In verse 7, we see that God is angry at the friends for having not spoken what is right about me as my servant Job has. I learned something interesting this week as I was preparing, that there are several commentators who say, and I think rightly so, I think it's rather compelling, that the Hebrew used in this story, in this context, suggests that God was not only worried about the content of what they said, but about the heart and how they were saying things. That the friends were not only saying things that were wrong at times, they weren't even addressing the God to whom they were talking about. Now, let's be clear. Not all of Job's words throughout this story have been 100% correct, even though he's vindicated by God at the end. And not all of the friends' words have been incorrect or wrong, even though they have, deservedly so, a bad reputation by the end of this story. The words having spoken rightly is not simply about what was said, but it was also to whom it was said and how it was said. And so God is angry at the friends for speaking to Job about God, but never bothering to speak to God. And so God rebukes the friends and sets about making things right. So reconciliation and restoration are at the heart of what God's doing here right at the beginning of our text. God is going about making things right between the friends and God and between the friends and Job. In verse 11, we see God bringing people from Job's life back into his sphere, back into his life, people who are able to properly meet his needs, people who are able to provide him with comfort and with sympathy. They eat with him, and they help him start his life over. Reconciled relationships come before Job is even blessed in the end. And when we get down to verse 12, God does go on to bless Job. In fact, he goes on to bless him twice as much as he was blessed before. I just have 2 quick thoughts on this. First, I want us to really be be careful not to see the blessing that God gives Job as some kind of reward, okay? So that word never gets mentioned here. There's no talk about reward. There's no talk about Job getting what's coming to him. There's no talk about God owing Job anything for the suffering that he has been through. I think to go down that road would perhaps be to maybe make the mistake that the friends made earlier on and taking that retribution principle and saying, well, Job, if you suffered this much, God must owe you an equal amount to that suffering. That's not what's happening here. Job is blessed not because he deserves it. He's blessed not because God owes him it. He's blessed simply because God desires to bless him. It's his grace. It's his pleasure. It's his delight. It's not duty. It's not obligation. God is not bound by any of those things. Remember in chapter 1, verse 21, Job says, the Lord what? The Lord gives and the Lord takes away. Blessed be the name of the Lord. God is the most free being, the most free agent in the universe, not bound by any rules that we like to make up or systems we like to put in place. And so blessing is not necessarily a reward or getting what's due. Second thing, God's blessing isn't necessarily meant to erase or to minimize Job's suffering and pain that he experienced. This is maybe reading between the lines a little bit, but just from a human perspective, we can imagine that although Job is blessed immensely at the end of his days, that there wasn't some lingering grief and pain that he carried with him the rest of his days, right? From just a human perspective, we have to realize that that is probably the case. Even though Job's immediate pain and suffering may have, the intensity may have lessened as time went on, the trauma and grief associated with the pain he experienced, the loss he experienced, would have likely been with him the rest of his life. So, don't think that God's blessings are necessarily rewards, and don't think that God's blessings are necessarily meant to erase or to minimize the pain and suffering that we experience or others experience. God's blessings in this life, rather, are just a foretaste of what's to come for the believer in eternal life. This is why I don't think the story is simply a happy ending, but it's pointing us to a new beginning entirely. And so as we end this series, I want to take us to two words that I think will help us as we live in what Brent was talking about, the already but not yet. Okay? And again, those words are perseverance and promise. So one of the main overarching themes of Job that we've seen as Job has gone on this journey of suffering and pain, and God has met him in the midst of that, one of the themes we see is that of perseverance. And I want to give credit to a scholar named Christopher Ash just for helping me to frame this idea. This isn't all my ideas here, but he helped me to frame this idea of perseverance in Job. And then we're going to look at, because we're the people of Jesus, and because we read the whole of the scriptures in light of who he is and what he's done for us, we see him throughout all of the scriptures, Old Testament to New Testament. And so I want us to hold on to one of the main overarching themes of Jesus, and that is that of promise. So let's start with perseverance. Ash notes two kinds of perseverance in the book of Job. The first is perseverance in warfare. And we looked at this last week. Brent did an amazing job of looking at the the cosmic battle that's been going on, and God who is defeating the enemy. Job is up against two enemies. He's up against Satan, and he's up against death. And these are two enemies that are fierce, that are strong, that are determined, and that Job is no match for. Job finds himself not only to be in a battlefield, but he's actually the battlefield itself. He is the place where the enemy is attacking. Ash says that the battle for Job's soul is fought in his struggles as the monster tears at his life. It is dark warfare. Satan fills Job's mind with images of despair and darkness, death and futility. And Job is taken through the valley of the shadow of death. But what did we learn last week? Job's enemy is no match for the God that he serves. Amen. God's friend, his glorious friend, is infinitely stronger than his fierce enemy. Psalm 23:4 says, even though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil. You are with me. Your rod and your staff, they comfort me. My friends, make no mistake. When you feel like you're walking through the valley of the shadow of death, sometimes it is because you are literally walking in the shadow of death. Whether that be the death of a loved one, or whether that be your death coming, sometimes it is because it is a very real thing for us, a reality for us. And the reality is there is a cosmic war taking place. There's a fierce enemy out there to destroy us. But as we saw last week, it's not even close to being an even match. God wins this war. He has won. That is sure. Last week we talked about the living in the already but not yet. And we live in this already but not yet truth. God has won on the cross and through the resurrection. He has secured victory for us. But we don't live in the fullness of that reality yet. Are there any World War II buffs out there? Any history buffs out there? It's like looking back on D-Day. We see the day that the Allies stormed the beaches of Normandy and started to advance on the continent of Europe and towards Germany, of course. And seeing how in hindsight, effectively, the war took a turning point there. There was a trajectory change. Once that initial invasion was successful, the trajectory of the war changed for good, and the Allies would win. But the war didn't officially end for over 12 months after that initial invasion. It was over a year until the war was done. There were many battles to be fought along the way. And likewise, God has won the war, but we find ourselves fighting battles even to this day. And we will until the war is over, until God declares it's over. We often find ourselves, just like Job, not just in the midst of a battlefield, we find ourselves the battlefield where the enemy is seeking to wreak havoc and destruction. Christopher Ash continues on saying, every morning we ought to wake up and say to ourselves, there's a vicious, dark, spiritual battle being waged over me, being waged over me, being waged over you. And the book of Job has reminded us of that reality these past few weeks. An inescapable part of the Christian life is warfare. And that's why we arm ourselves, not with guns or with tanks, but we arm ourselves with the armor of God, as it says in Ephesians 6. We arm ourselves with what? With truth and with righteousness. We arm ourselves with peace and with faith. We arm ourselves with salvation and with the gift of the Spirit indwelling us. We arm ourselves with the Word of God and with prayer. We lean on God and all that He's won for us, and we press on. We move forwards. So, when our two oldest sons, Caleb and Levi, were 4 years old, they were given a book by someone that addressed the topic of perseverance and trying to communicate that to children to help kids push through difficult things. Instead of using the words perseverance over and over in the book, they had this phrase that they would say, keep on keeping on. Keep on keeping on. And those words meant a lot to our sons because it just kind of became a catchphrase for them that they would use with each other. Come on, Caleb, keep on keeping on. Keep on keeping on. And so it gave them a language in order to encourage themselves and one another in going through tough things. And when they were 4, they got to go through a low ropes course. This was when we were living in Central Asia, so you'll notice there's no safety harness or no none of that kind of stuff going on. There is a net at the bottom, so if they fell, it wasn't too dangerous, but it was definitely challenging for them to go through. And when Caleb had just completed one tough section near the end, he turned back and he saw his brother Levi stuck at one point, kind of shaking, holding onto the rope, not sure how to take the next step forward. And Caleb's line was just perfect. He said, come on, Levi, keep on keeping on. And it just gave Levi just that little boost of encouragement to keep on keeping on. It kind of echoes that quote that Brent shared with us from Elizabeth Elliot a few weeks ago, right? Just do the next right thing. We persevere through the fight, knowing that God is fighting on our behalf. Jesus himself, through the cross and through the resurrection, through descending into darkness for us, through taking our sin onto himself, and then being raised to life and defeating death, has won a victory for us. The war is won, friends. The war is won. He will ultimately reign victoriously. There's nothing that can hold him back from accomplishing all that he has set out to do. And our job today is to focus on him, to lean on him, and to press on. We press on, not out of our own strength, but on his. We press on, not because we can overcome what is assailing us, but because he has and will ultimately overcome evil, sin, and death. We press on. Another aspect to perseverance is perseverance in waiting. Now, what does that mean? Does that mean just sitting by, twiddling our thumbs and saying, okay, God, I'm just going to wait until you do what you're going to do? I don't think it's a passive kind of waiting that we're talking about here. It's an active kind of waiting. It's intentional. It's waiting on God in prayer, but more than that, it's also calling out to God. It's a deep yearning and groaning and longing deep within our souls for God to act on our behalf and on behalf of creation. It's a desire for things to be as they should, not as they are. It's the desire for restoration and renewal, for God to do what he says in Revelation 21:5, I make all things new. Job waited on God, but it wasn't a silent waiting. He called out in desperation over and over and over again. So today marks officially the first day of spring, as Brent had mentioned. And it doesn't look much like spring out there, but it is officially the first day of spring. Winter is over, and the cold is receding, believe it or not, even if the snow is here at any point over the next few months. I grew up here in the Okanagan Valley, and springtime in the Okanagan, by about this time and towards the end of March, usually means this. Usually means blossoms, usually means that the green is starting to come up, the sunshine is warm. And when I moved here to Alberta, I discovered that springtime here for us folk looks like this. I don't know if you noticed a difference here, but it was a bit of a shock to my system when I came here 14 years ago. But no, I'm kidding, of course. In due time, we're going to have some great weather, and I love the green rolling hills here are just gorgeous in springtime. I'm an Albertan now. Over the last 14 years, I've become that. But you and I are going to notice a difference over the next few weeks as we spend time outside, as we get sunshine and vitamin D inside of us, we get exercising again. We're going to start having some more energy. You're going to feel more active. You're going to feel perhaps encouraged. Sometimes you might feel more alert and happier in the spring. I like to think it's because we experience true winter here in Canada that we get to enjoy, that we have a true appreciation for springtime and summer. There's that longing. There's that yearning and groaning to emerge from the snow and ice and to come into the warmth and sun once again. And across cultures and across times, this has been the case that this time of year has represented often the cosmic struggle between darkness and light, between death and life. Isn't that interesting? Now, hear what I'm not saying. I'm not saying that other cultures and religions are right in what they're teaching. But what I am saying, or what I am noticing, is that it's really intriguing that there's this almost instinctual understanding that's hardwired into us as created beings to notice this and to make these kinds of connections. So our family recently moved from Central Asia back to Canada, back in October. And today, March 20th, marks a special holiday in that region of the world. So all the different stands, you've got Kazakhstan, Tajikistan, all the stand countries celebrate a holiday called Nowruz. And this is one of the biggest holidays of the year. It's bigger than Christmas, bigger than New Year, bigger than lots of holidays that they celebrate. And there's tons of festivals and food and parties. It's an amazing, amazing time. And Nowruz comes from the Persian word for new day. New day. And we long for a new day, don't we? We long for a new order of things. We long for a new creation, for restoration and for renewal, for all things to be made new. That desire is hardwired, that longing is hardwired into us. And until Jesus comes back, We live with a bit of a tension. We live with this desire unresolved. We find ourselves living in the already but not yet. We find ourselves longing for change, for the light to finally extinguish the darkness once and for all. And Job shows us that longing for God to show up in times of darkness, longing for him to be near, to be close, and to ultimately bring restoration and renewal for us and for our world, that posture and that attitude is necessary in order to persevere in the darkness. If we're to persevere in the warfare by pressing on, I believe we're to persevere in the waiting by pressing in. We need to lean into God's presence, his power by the Spirit, and his provision for us by the cross. We need to live with a simple but relentless desperation for him. As I mentioned earlier, the final section of Job can be easy to sum up by saying, all's well that ends well. But I think to say this is a happy ending is to be in serious risk of being trite and trivial and perhaps simplistic. I think a better approach, a better reading of this as the people of Jesus is to say that this is pointing to a new beginning entirely. It's foreshadowing of what's to come for those of us who know Christ. Listen to what the Bible says in James 5, chapter 7 and 8. It says this, "Be patient then, brothers and sisters, until the Lord's coming. See how the farmer wants for the land to yield its valuable crop, patiently waiting for the autumn and spring rains. You too be patient and stand firm, because the Lord's coming is near. As you know, we count as blessed those who have persevered. You have heard of Job's perseverance and have seen what the Lord finally brought about. The Lord is full of compassion and mercy." Jesus promises that he is coming back. He's promising to us that he will set things right once and for all. He will restore and he will renew all things. He has won a victory on the cross, and he's given us his Holy Spirit as a down payment for what is to come. Dale, if I can have you and the band come up at this point. Earlier on, we read from Psalm 23 about how sometimes we walk through the valley of the shadow of death. But do you know what the final two verses of that psalm say? You prepare what? A table for me in the presence of my enemies. You anoint my head with oil. My cup overflows. Surely your goodness and your love will follow me all the days of my life, and I will dwell in the house of the Lord forever. A table set for us in the presence of our enemies. The last Sunday, before we moved to Central Asia, I was sitting in the church that we had been attending at the time, and it was Communion Sunday, just like this morning. And I remember being extremely nervous. We were flying out the next day with our family around the world. I was scared. I didn't know what was going to happen as we brought our young family that far from here, from home. But I clearly remember the Lord saying, "This is food for the journey. This is food for the journey." I don't think he was saying that there was anything special about the bread and the juice that I was taking that morning. But as a reminder that all the needs I have, all the fears I have, all the unknowns that lay out there, all of what's to come my way, have been put in subjection under the cross of Jesus. Friends, we're going to face many battles in our lives, but we need to patiently and eagerly await the return of Jesus to make all things new. And in the meantime, friends, Jesus sets a table before us in the presence of our enemies. Perhaps this morning, he is saying to us, friends, this is food for the battle. This is food for the journey. I believe he's saying that he is our source and that he is our victory. And so we're going to take communion this morning. If you didn't grab a little cup and wafer on your way in this morning, please feel free to go grab one now. We're going to sing a song before we partake. This is for all believers in Jesus to partake in. Hopefully you receive this cup. Dale and the worship team are going to lead us to prepare our hearts this morning to take that. And this is a tangible way for us to participate in the heart of the gospel. Jesus gave himself for us. He liberated us from our sins. And as we trust in him, we can receive that. He has secured our eternal destiny with him. And because of that, we can keep pressing on. We can press in. We can persevere. And by partaking, we remember not only what Jesus did for us, but we actually align ourselves with his promises. We say, yes, this is what is true. This is where life is. This is where my hope is found. This world, as it is not all that there is. And this world, as it is not all that there will be. Let me read for you from Revelation 21, verses 1 to 5, to close. This is where we are heading. This is the hope that we have in Christ. This is the new beginning that Jesus has secured for us. It says this, "Then I saw a new heaven and a new earth, for the first heaven and the first earth had passed away, and the sea was no more. And I saw the holy city, New Jerusalem, coming down out of heaven from God, prepared as a bride adorned for her husband. And I heard a loud voice from the throne, saying, 'Behold, the dwelling place of God is with man. He will dwell with them, and they will be his people. And God himself will be with them as their God. He will wipe away every tear from their eyes, and death shall be no more. Neither shall there be mourning, nor crying, nor pain anymore, for the former things have passed away.' And he who is seated on the throne said, 'Behold, I am making all things new.'" Friends, the best is yet to come.